Hello, I'm Soycat, and yesterday the world's third largest economy held an election, and today's results are shocking to say the least because the formerly French Alternative for Germany has come second place with 1 in every 5 votes going to them, but despite this, they are not going to be a part of the next government, something their leader calls a betrayal. So why is that? And why is it that anyone who voted for economically liberal or left-wing and other parties have got about 15% of the vote between them, but have ended up with 0 seats? Well, the German election system is weird, but it is now clear who the next leader of Germany is going to be based on this parliament, and that leader, despite being one of the US's best allies and biggest advocates, has come out and said that basically we need to have independence from the United States, and there is going to be a seismic shift in transatlantic relations. What exactly is causing this? Let's explain the German election. So, simply put, here are the German election results as they exist. The first biggest party is the CDU-CSU. They are both union parties that union together for elections. Very interesting. They are center-right, you could say. We have the AfD, which I think are often called far-right, particularly within Germany, where they have reasons that they refer to them that way. But you could call them as, you can call them populist, you can call them radical, you can call them whatever you want to, but they are the furthest right party on the German political spectrum. And then we have in third place the SPD, which is kind of the center-left traditional, left-wing governance party, doing shockingly poorly at 16.4% of the vote, narrowly followed by the Greens, and then the Left Party at 8.8. Then we have all of these parties, the BSW, the others, and the FDP, none of which got any seats, or at least no seats from the national representation, because you need to have at least 5% of the votes to have any nationally apportioned seats, and so they do not enter the Bundestag, which means that even though the FDP only lost about 7.1% of their vote share, just under 2/3, which is still a disaster usually, it means they go from having 91 seats to having 0 seats. The FDP is eliminated from the parliament altogether because of this 5% threshold, and this is exactly what has happened quite tragically with the BSW. They get no national representation because they are falling 0.03% short of that rule, which is kind of crazy, but then this alters the electoral calculus for everyone else. Because these parties don't get any seats, having 28.6% of the vote doesn't just get you 28.6% of the seats, it gets you 28.6%, it gets you that percent of the seats plus that exist, which isn't going to include about 15% of voters. And so in other words, and the same is true for the AFT, they got 20.8% of the votes, but they've ended up getting, as you can see here, 152 seats, which is almost a quarter in the 630-seat German parliament. And so now the coalition talks begin. This is something that happens after every election. As you can see, for the last 30 years, there's been a coalition in Germany constantly because their system more or less guarantees it. To have a German government, you need to have 50% of the elected representatives, so very close to 50% of the seats, slightly under because of the 5% rule, but you need to have 50% of the seats because you need to have the majority of German people agreeing on something. I'm not saying German people because I don't think German people are people. I'm saying German people because of their elected representatives, by the way. Want to be very clear on that one, but it is the internet after all. But yeah, if you look at this quite importantly, you can see therefore that you need to have a majority, and the easiest majority you can make, and the traditional majority you would make in any other country, is probably just take the two parties that are closest on the political spectrum and then say, yeah, they should work together. In this case, the easiest coalition would be the CDU/CSU and the AfD. This would give them 360 seats over the 316 minimum. However, Germany has something that the main parties call a firewall to the what they call the far right, and this leaves and this basically makes it impossible for anyone to work with the AfD. The CDU did technically, have the tiniest breach of this in the pre-election campaign. They allowed the AfD to vote on their motion. Correction, in my video I said the CDU voted on the AfD's motion. The AfD supported the CDU one, and that's what allowed them to pass it. But in either case, the AfD is something that the main parties choose not to work with. And if you don't know why Germany has a particular fear of the far right, then I don't know, look into Germany's history, I guess, and you might start to get it. I don't know why they don't have a similar fear of the far left, given also if you look into their history, they have at least half their country has a problem with that. And but anyway, the important thing here is, as a result of the AfD being excluded, you basically have a situation where the AfD will not be able to form a government unless they get a majority of votes by themselves. So what is the most likely coalition? Well, the logical would be first and second place, right? 28 plus 20. And so the second most logical is CDU, CSU, and the SPD. In Europe, this is called a grand coalition, when you take the two biggest parties and you combine them together, and this, if the two parties agree, gets them slightly over the majority threshold. Previous majority governments have taken, that are grand coalitions, have taken the longest to form. As you can see, when the CDU and the FDP, the Economic Liberal Party, get together, they can kind of work out, like, the economic liberals might want the CDU to chill on the social stuff, the CDU might want the economically liberal people to kind of dampen some of their policies in some ways, but in general, you can get agreement very quickly. The same is true between the centre-left and the Green Party. It's very easy to get these parties to come together to work out some party for government, some program for government, rather, I should say, whereas the CDU and the SPD are effectively opposite sides of the, if you are to transpose it into the British political system, it's the Conservatives and the Labour Party, the parties that are traditionally fighting to be the leader of government, but in some cases they become the only viable possibility, because right now the only other one that exists is you can go CDU, CSU, Greens, and the left. This isn't actually that illogical. In Europe, Green Party tends to usually not be super fringe left, like they mean in the UK and maybe the US too, but instead you can see that as a result, therefore, the CDU and the CSU and the Greens might have had enough policy together that this actually makes some sense. Did it just break on me right there? Anyway, they might have had enough in common that they could have formed a government, but in this case, it looks more likely that it's going to have to be one of these possibilities. However, this has been disastrous for the SPD. Every time they get into grand coalition with the CDU, it's been terrible for their vote share, and particularly with how German politics is going right now, it's going to be something they're not going to want to get involved with without some serious caveats. And so, as a result, what's going to happen? The answer is a lot of days of, talk. The previous CDU-SPD coalition was 171. It could be that Germany is without an effective government for quite a few months, something that the new leader, because again, the largest party, Merz, is the person who gets to seek to form the coalition. He is someone who is trying to really argue that we need to strengthen Europe, we need to get together and work this out. Obviously, as the largest party in any potential coalition, they're basically saying we need to make sure that we get a government working out real soon, and, he is called already to work out what the coalition should be. And what's really interesting about this is, again, he has literally said, again, one more time, if we had one partner, it would be easy. If we need two partners, it would be harder. But even in that case, it will have to be successful, because the main thing to create government in Germany that is capable of acting as quickly as possible with a good parliamentary majority. Because, dear friends, the world out there is not waiting for us and is not waiting for lengthy coalition talks and negotiations. There's the phrase there. It's really important to note that because, yeah, even in 2017, you could argue that the Germans had the luxury of a functioning economy, that they could wait 6 years to work out what they're going 6 months to work out what they're going to do with it. However, right now is not the time. There is a war going on in Europe, and Europeans have to work out how much they want to be involved with that. But more specifically, there is also the issue of the United States. I think this is if you're from the US, I think you can really easily say, why is everyone in Europe acting like it's a big deal when we're just saying we're going to treat you like normal countries and we're stop going to defending you the way that we have? Like, we want you to look after your own military. How crazy. Whereas Europeans see that, yeah, Americans have basically wanted to underwrite Europe for a very long time. They have asked to put military bases in our countries, and we've gone, okay, then I guess you can have your own sovereign air of our nation. And now they're kind of reversing that quickly, though. I think that's the clear shift, is that America has started to signal that defending Europe is not one of their priorities anymore, and they see Europe as a Europe issue. This is probably due to the growth of the EU, which is a very fair point, but the fact that the new president has basically taken this policy, which has been slowly starting to happen, and has kicked it into a brand new gear, is why Europe has to work out, what are we going to do? Does this mean a common EU army? Does this mean we need to have a European wing of NATO and prepare for the idea that even if NATO is under attack, the US might shirk its obligations? It has proven before that it's willing to ignore certain treaties, right? Is it willing to ignore an attack on a NATO state? Should we be worried about that? These are all fears in Europe, whether they're true or not, I guess depends on your view of the world. But yeah, the interesting part of this is actually the AfD leader is the probably most interesting bit to many people on the internet, particularly amongst young people. You can see this is very true here. Young people are one of the AfD's biggest constituencies. Between about between 18 and 24, and then 35 and 44, so I guess 18 to 44, people who have grown up in the last 30 years or so, all of these people are seeing the the right wing, the most right wing party within the German parliament. They are seeing them as increasingly being a good option. It's weird. Usually you have old people who go most to the right, but they're going quite traditionally right. Old people are loving the CDU CSU, whereas young people are loving this new fringe right wing party. And so why is that the case? This is something I guess Europeans have to work out, but it's something that their leader, her name is Alice Weidel, sees as something that is a matter of time until her party holds power. Our hand remains outstretched to form a government, and it would be tantamount to electoral fraud if the first place Conservatives chose to govern with left-wing parties rather than them. In other words, saying, one of the possibilities for coalition is that the CDU works with the left party, the most left-wing party within the German parliament, working with them when there is a party that is just to their right over here, much closer aligned, despite crossing that firewall, if you will. They would see that as a shock, and they think that if this were to happen, the next time they'll come first. This is actually, so again, in terms of what does this mean for Europe, the answer is Germany's going to have to work amongst themselves and then work out with other European countries, particularly EU nations, what exactly Europe is going to start doing. So Germany has to pick a new direction for the continent, you could say. In the age of Trump, that's something you might want to say. But what's extra interesting is that electorally, Germany also has to be careful, presuming that they have this firewall, because, again, let's just assume that everyone in Germany thinks that keeping the furthest right party out of government is the most important thing. How do you keep them from growing in the future? What is it that is causing the AfD vote share to rise every single election? It's very hard. And what's extra interesting is if you look at you can see voter migration. Where did these AfD get the most voters from? Well, you can see that the SPD lost 700,000 to them. The CDU lost 1 million voters to them. The Greens even lost 100,000. The FDP lost almost 1 million. And the AfD have gained from every other party besides the BSW. The only other party, so the left party is the leftmost party in the current German parliament. The BSW it's quite hard to define politically, but they're somewhere right next to them, I think we can say simply. And so the only other party that the AfD lost votes to are the fringe on the left. And so people, especially young people, are voting more and more for political extremes. Is that a sign that we want to see extreme change? And so do you deliver that extreme change for them, or do you show them the value in consensus-based democracy or whatever else? I don't actually know the answer to that, but what I do think is interesting is a lot of people are criticizing the German election system. I'll be honest, it's mostly people, there's a certain breed of people on the internet who see this as a betrayal that the second largest party will certainly not be a part of the government. But I would like to offer my defense for the system, and let's just imagine, and it's not going to be like an attack on the AfD's values, because if I'm being honest, most populist right-wing parties aren't actually crazy right-wing. Like, if you look at their policies, they have loads of random left-wing stuff mixed in there. That is my, again, just my observation. I don't understand why that is true. It doesn't seem to make much sense. Besides this idea that, yeah, people just want to have a party that's willing to do the different things. But so let's just say that the AfD are a party just like any other. But if you think about the way that a German parliament works, or any European parliament, the basic idea is not to reward whoever gets the most votes. Imagine if the CDU was led by someone everyone despised, every other politician hated and did not want to work with. There's some concerning beeping outside. No one wants to work with these people, right? If they wanted to, every other party could make a firewall against the CDU. If every other party hates the Greens, if we suddenly just, we can decide not to include anyone in a coalition talk, because the point of having lots of parties is that lots of views can be expressed, and if the majority of the people who vote for all of the other parties specifically don't like these people, then that is saying that 79.2% of people don't want these people in government. It would be a betrayal for them to be in government in that case. To mix this around, let's imagine the CDU-CSU is replaced with the, again, just for the sake of my AfD loving viewers out there, imagine they're replaced with the furthest left communists, the people who say, you know what, I don't think Stalin went far enough, communists. then wouldn't it be reasonable to say that they shouldn't get to lead the next government? Because even though 28.6% of people agree, the majority of people don't. Or for people who are horseshoe extremists, where they love the AfD and the communists, and they only hate centrist liberals who get change done in increments, imagine that this party was the Nuke Bhutan party. They are the party that specifically hates Bhutan. They're going to send a nuke over there, and they're going to destroy it, and they want to start a thermonuclear war that will end Dior and everyone you know's life. Let's just say that that is the name of this party. There's no not nuking Bhutan party. It's such a baseline political consensus that everyone else agrees we shouldn't nuke Bhutan. In the current German parliament, 100% of the seats went to anti-nuking Bhutan parties, but if it was only 78%, wouldn't that be pretty reasonable that we not nuke Bhutan? Because even though they're the largest individual party, that would be a thing. Or if we use the US system, there was a primary over there. The US basically has the coalition system, but it works in the primaries. In the primaries, let's just say there's Trump Republicans, there's Texas Republicans, there's Hawk Republicans, and there's kind of centrist Republicans, right? They split into these 4 factions. They all vote on which of those 4 people gets to lead their coalition, and then they lead that coalition to the voters. It's the effective same system. You wouldn't say like, oh yeah, the Americans keep it, as a result of the way the primary process works, you basically, if you want to vote for either one of these Republicans, you can't have that because this guy is leading the party, and same reverse of the Democrats, I guess you could say. In Germany, if you like a different leader, if you think that the right should be headed by this woman rather than this man, you vote for this woman rather than this man. If you think the left, if you think Olaf Scholz is a bit too mild, you want a more radical left, you vote for not this person. Maybe, again, it's Europe. You vote for this woman. I'm pretty sure. Did I get that right? No, yeah, you vote for this woman or this man. They both lead the party. Isn't that lovely? If you believe in, for example, the FDP, if I'm not mistaken, are a bit more socially left and economically right, if you want to have a more balancing factor, if you think that there's too many people voting for this woman and this man and this woman, then you vote for this person, and that way coalitions have to follow those rules or whatever. You get the idea that you get to influence your government, but you get to do so by saying, I want to have my position represented in that government, rather than saying, the lesser of two evils approach, which is what a two-party system is. I think the coalition system works. And even though you might look at this and be like, well, isn't it unfair that the second biggest party is not a part of the government? You can theoretically, in most German parliaments, not this one, but you could theoretically make a system where, like, okay, we could split, we could make it so that the fifth party, the fourth party, and the third party, and then a tiny bit of either the first or second parties, if they were willing to split, they could come together and they could form a government that way. And it's not undemocratic because you're trying to get to 50% of the opinion. The whole point is to acknowledge that public opinion isn't binary, and I think it's an awesome system, personally. I do think I think the 5% rule is one of the most controversially strange things. Like 4.97, I would not be a BSW voter probably, but if you are a BSW voter, I think you should be outraged that, like, oh yeah, well, we got a few thousand too few votes, and so our representation goes from what would be what would that be? Like, what would be 30 seats? It goes down to 0 because of the tiny little margins. I think that's a weird part of the system, but it's one of the things that means that Germany has 5 parties rather than, I don't know. If we look at I think the Danish election is always the funniest one for this. They have so many parties, they have to, like, express them as, like, letters. So in 2011, Denmark had about 7 or 8 major parties. And, in 2022, they have about 10, I guess you could say. But this is a fairer way. You can be like, oh yeah, it allows for what would be these fringe movements to express themselves without having to feel like you have to go all the way to the extreme or all the way for the centrist, boring people or whatever. Is that a better system? I guess it depends on how you think government should work. Should government be stable first and foremost, or should government represent its opinion of the people first and foremost? And the answer is you actually don't have an answer. Like, there are countries without any democracy that can still represent their people, and you know where one of them is? It's Bhutan! Which is why we should nuke it to get it off the face of the earth. I'm sorry, Bhutan. I love you guys. Don't go. Don't go. Don't do it. Don't do it. Okay, I reversed my course. I'm gonna get arrested if I go to Bhutan now, aren't I? Anyway, second channel. Don't care. Goodbye. Oh, actually, I do care. I've got something to share with you. So I've been doing A/B tests on thumbnails. It's one of the most fascinating YouTube features, and so you can see when you look on a video, if you go to reach here, you can be like, okay, so this video got 50.9%, like 50.9% watch time from this video came from the 50% of people who saw this thumbnail versus 49.1% like this one. So on this video, we can see people like maps more than they like people, but if you give most choices, if we look at if we look at another example, if you give people the choice between a map which has a person on it and a map which doesn't, people love the person in front of the map. People love people on their maps for their thumbnails, so if you're curious, here's one with Canada wanting free trade. But there's a key caveat on that. You need to know the person on the thumbnail. This is the Canadian Prime Minister, or former Prime Minister. I don't know if he's actually left yet. This is the Austrian man. But if we go to Hong Kong, no one actually knows the face of the opposition politicians there. So people seemingly like the map much more without the face on it. So, you know, there's something interesting for you. I wonder how this video will go. Let me know. Did you see a face in your thumbnail or not? Wait, no, there's faces in all the thumbnails. Did you see the multicolored face or did you see the less colored face? Let me know. Anyway, thank you for watching, and you can give me money on Patreon, and I'll use it to buy a lobster roll. I got the worst lobster roll of my life yesterday. I'm hoping to get a better one soon. But yeah, you can become a free Patreon now, so you can watch videos without having to pay, if that's your thing. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll see you another time. Or I won't. You know, if Bhutan elects a nuke the UK party, I am screwed.